Okay, well, shalom, shalom to everybody, and Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
It's time for Vayikra. I'm excited about this week's Torah portion. I was, we I don't know how many Torah cycles we've been through, and I was thinking, oh, Vayikra, now we're going to go into this thing, and then I studied, and I was like, okay, we start out with these offerings, and then I'm thinking, hold on. And I started reading some different things about it. I'm like, there's more stuff that's just so good. It's just rich. And I hope that I can if I could just bring out an nth of what we've been, what I studied, and then you get something out of it, it will really please me. But just so you know, I'm always, why should I always be amazed?
I know.
I shouldn't.
We should just be used to it, huh?
I know. It's like, what are we going to discover this time around? And oh my goodness, there's just not enough time, because you know what happens? Tomorrow begins the next week of Torah studies, after sundown today, which brings in Tzav, the red heifer. It includes the red heifer. Yes. And I know that's been in the news a lot, because
even the mainstream news was talking to Hamas about it.
Yeah,
they were bringing it out too.
Yeah, and if you
correctly, but
right,
they were going to the wrong people. But
and if you listen to Let Us Reason Together, we talked a little bit about it, and I actually said, we have to get there, because there's so many outlets that sensationalize these things. I don't want to sensationalize it. Yeah. I really don't. What I want to do is I want to just look at what's happening. And then, how does that fit? How does this fit in this biblical timeline? And how does this fit into all of the things that we're seeing? I want to tell you something too. I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep going on these trails, but there's some things that are coming out when you look at the priestly calendar, and it relates to specific events that has happened at specific times. They fell on the same date on the priestly calendar in history.
Wow. And
one of the things that came out has to do with the Tower of Babel and the destruction of, it has something to do with the Tower of Babel. I think it has something to do with the destruction of the first and the second temple, and I think so the next connection is actually when you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls and what those prophets wrote in the apocryphal writings, is it relates to another temple that I think is what Israel is wanting to do in building the third temple, which is the anti-Messiah temple, in my opinion. And it's related to the Tower of Babel time period, which relates to some of these other things that are big events that speak of this anti-biblical system.
Yes.
The third temple hasn't been built yet, but could it be that it's going to be inaugurated, or the starting of the building is going to end up following on that same date? Well, if history proves out, it's interesting that we are starting to have this understanding of the priestly calendar and what prior events have done and have replicated. My goodness, it's just amazing.
I was reminded about something last night. I listened to somebody, and he pointed out that the red heifer, it says it, he read it, it's in Numbers, I think. Well, it's next week, I guess, but it is for ones that have come in contact with the dead body, right? Mm-hmm. Which I guess we pretty much maybe all have, but maybe not. So he said that he thinks that they can start building that at any time. They don't have to have that, because it's not for the altar. That is something else, right? I don't remember now.
The altar was already set up and running before they did the red heifer.
Mm-hmm.
So that red heifer was specifically for the people who
for dead bodies, being in contact with dead bodies.
Okay, so it relates to that.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking that they had to have it, and I was like, okay, when they do this, they're going to do something right away. Is what I thought, but they can do it apparently at any time according to him. And
Well,
he was quoting Torah. So.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because the red heifers that they have right now are aging out.
Yeah.
So at a certain point in time, they have to do something with it. And they've built the ramp that leads up to where they're going to do that. But then they can preserve those ashes.
Right.
And use them whenever it's ready.
Yes.
And it's for the purification of the furnishings and for the temple and for the priesthood.
So it's
and
not just for somebody who's dead.
and for death.
And
So,
that.
mhm,
So they do need it.
they do need it. And
That's not
yeah.
what that guy was saying.
Yeah, Irma.
I just need to read it.
Just a real quick question, yes or no?
Uh-huh.
Does the red heifer have to be from the land of Israel?
I
That's what we had understood.
No, I don't think it says.
I think it just says a red heifer, but that's next week's Torah portion. Stay tuned.
We have that question.
It does not even say anything about the two hairs. It just says that unblemished should never have been under yoke or anything like that. So it is the Pharisees and it's the priests that have added, man added additional things to it to make it that way.
Yeah. Eddie and Tammy put in here, read Isaiah 52:11 and 12. This requires the water of purification, which must have the ashes of the red heifer.
Okay.
And understand this. Okay, who are the modern Orthodox Jews? They are the descendants of the Pharisees. And what do? They strain the what is the phrase? They strain the whatever about the gnats, the gnats and strain the, in other words, they go down to such minutia. It's like, that's almost an impossibility if you follow it. And then you're always breaking their oral Torah, so they're straining the gnats for the flies, I think is what it is. But so that's why they completely go through and they're looking for any white hair on that red heifer. Well, wouldn't it actually be amazing to have a completely red heifer, that y'all would do that as part of trying to get their attention, even using their rules against them? Because remember the three messianic miracles that I talked about? You can go back to our channel here and listen to hear that teaching. Yeshua used specifically. I hear the sound of the shofar.
Sorry.
Are we going up? Are we going? So, okay. But he used their teachings against them. And that's what the Messianic miracles are about as well. So I just really, strain at the gnats and swallow camels. Yeah, that's just not kosher.
Either way.
All right. Okay, we need to pray. It's just all very interesting right now. And I think in the red heifer, specifically, does it have to be raised in the land? I don't think it's necessarily. It's just in the land. So but Hamas is very, apparently there's a connection to October 7th, which on the priestly calendar, it's interesting on what date that fell on the priestly calendar. But that's a whole nother subject. We are apparently had something to do with the red heifer, and so they're looking at some type of major offensive against Israel that's going to be connected to specifically what the rabbis are wanting to do with the red heifer sacrifice now. And so we shall see. All I can say is we're living in a very, very interesting times. Everything is igniting. I mean, all over the place.
You know what I still hear though? Heard it just yesterday.
Uh-huh.
I don't know say who. Every generation has said this. This is the end days. Every generation has said this. And I'm like, yeah, but
Yeah.
this is different. I'm sorry, this is so different.
Yeah, my grandfather and grandmother used to tell us.
Yep, yes.
Yep, exactly right.
Every generation thinks that time started with them.
It ends with them.
Things that are exploding, I don't know if y'all heard this or not, but there was a terrorist attack in Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Killed all those people. Yeah,
Over 100 people were killed.
Yep.
Nobody's immune.
that's right.
The
Yeah.
other thing that I heard was that the Muslims had abandoned the Temple Mount for a day or two this last week. I don't know why they do that, but that may not be anywhere near true.
I don't think so. And they were,
That Ramadan.
yeah, Ramadan, they are fasting in the day, but then they eat and party at night.
At night. Mhm.
And they were saying how those people were starving, but he said, what I saw, they were having a great old time eating
Mhm.
everything they could. So I don't know.
There-
You just
all-
can't hear. I mean, you don't know what's true.
We're only allowed to see what we're allowed to see,
Yes.
and we don't know
Yes.
unless we actually go there.
Yeah.
Or you have really, really good sources
And
that
I'm
can
not
just
saying that
identify
they're
it. So-
not, maybe there's some are, but they have food to celebrate with somehow. So. Which
Yeah.
is fine. I mean, I would want food to celebrate with my God, but I don't agree with them.
Yeah. Can I have someone open us up in prayer? Anybody? Rick?
Father, we just come to you today with a grateful heart. Every week we come here and it seems like we open with a very similar type prayer over, and sometimes I feel like where you're saying that, do not pray like this, just repeating. So today we just want to thank you from the heart. And we want you to know that we love you and we thank you for watching over us. Even when we don't know that you are, we thank you for watching over us. And we thank you everything you do for us. And we don't have a way to equalize the scale. That scale is so much one-sided on your side. So all we can do is to let you know that we love you and we think about you all the time. We think about how can we be better? How can we correct the things each day? Try to do something that you would be proud of us for, that, the same, that maybe you can say, well, maybe they're learning. But most important, we want to be able to say each week when we start the week, try to make it where we do nothing that'll sadden your heart. That is one of the things that we strive for. And we're learning in this. We're moving along like an inch at a time. It seems like we're never getting all of the things that we need, but we just want you to know that we love you and that we are trying. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rick. I sure appreciate that. Oh, well, those are online. By the way, go in there and click the thumbs up, and we certainly appreciate that. That helps the algorithms. I just wanted to throw that out real quick. And like, share, and subscribe. There we go. Put that back up there. Like, share, and subscribe. All right. So, okay, that was just a quick reminder. Vayikra, Leviticus. Okay. All right. By the way, Eddie and Tammy brought it, the Torah portion on Let Us Reason. We got this last week. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, I recommend going in that and catching that. They brought out a lot of great points about Vayikra, Leviticus. So we call it Leviticus, which, does anybody know what that means?
And he called.
But Leviticus, I like that. Yes, Vayikra, and he called. I'm going to put that on the board because I was going to get there. And he called. Okay. Leviticus, but we have in our English Bibles Leviticus. And I really believe that that's all part of the disinformation campaign against our biblical values.
Hebrews.
Is it priestly? Is it the priestly sacrifices or something like that?
Yeah,
Seems
so
like I read that somewhere.
pertaining to the priests,
Yeah.
pertaining to
Yes.
the
That's right.
Levites.
Yeah.
And so when we think about that, it's like, all right, now we start going in. And because the book Leviticus actually has a lot of information in it, but people will just say, well, that doesn't apply to me today.
That's right. Yeah.
And yet in it is everything. I mean, why is Leviticus the center of the Torah? These circles represent the Torah. Why is it the center? And as Eddie and Tammy brought out, that at certain, when you look at letter spacing throughout the Torah, going this direction, you have Yod, He, Vav, He, spelled out every so many letters, coming this direction toward Leviticus, and then for Numbers and Deuteronomy, it's going back Yod, He, Vav, He. You got to think backwards, leading that direction, leading back to Leviticus. So it seems to me that there's a significance to that, and it's really, really packed.
Yeah.
So with that information. So I think that's important, but I'm not going to go and rehash everything that they said, but it stands at the center of Torah. That's what I want to say. The very center verse is in the Torah. We've gone over that in the past. We'll probably hit it again next time we get to that Torah portion. The very center word and the center letter. I think those are all very significant when you see all those elements. And it's in this book of Vayikra. We have a narrative that's coming out of Exodus. And what was the last thing in Exodus? Shemot, names, the names. What is the last thing that happens in the book of Exodus?
The glory.
The glory comes in. The tabernacle is completed,
Mm-hmm.
and the glory fills the tabernacle.
Hallelujah.
In fact, isn't it very interesting that Moses, when the glory came down, that he was unable to enter the tabernacle? Well, why? I mean, Moses had been entering into the presence of Yah, going up and down the mountain, and he'd go up in there and he'd go into the presence of Yah, and yet the glory came in and filled the place, yet he was not able to go in until something happened. So, yeah, did you? Oh, okay. All right. So think about that. Why? What was it? Because the glory filled it, but was it ready? And what had to be done to make it ready? So, and it wasn't ready. They had moved in. They moved in the Ark of the Covenant. They had set up the veil between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. They had set up the menorah and the table of showbread and the table of incense. I mean, all the furnishings were in place. All the coverings were there. All the walls were in place. The covering was over the top of all of that. And it's like, okay, it's all good. And then y'all just came down and filled it. And they were going in and out of it until y'all filled it. And they didn't go into it until a particular point in time. Why? And Leviticus tells us that, or Vayikra tells us that. And we start out with Vayikra. Now, it says here that Vayikra, I put it on the board, this part of the word right there is the and that we see. And then the last part talks about this calling. I want to dig into this a little bit more. I honestly don't remember if we talked about this in the past, but I'm going to, if not, it's a great refresher about this whole element of Vayikra, because what is it that we start out with? We start talking about these sacrifices, or I'm going to say sacrifices. These are offerings.
Yeah.
And it has to do with something that's very, very personal. Next week, to draw near to him, exactly, as if it is a personal invitation where he's waiting for us. But there is also a connection with this little thing right here, because I put the Hebrew letters right here. But in Vayikra, in that first verse of the first chapter, it is a diminished aleph. And why? Why? And it's a connection to Bilam. Why? Because this word Vayikar versus Vayikra, there's a difference, because Balaam, the false prophet, also was called. But in that sense, and we'll get into more of those details, it was not as in a personal invitation, as this is very important to y'all for you to come with me. It's as if by happenstance, y'all shows up in front of Balaam. And so it's like, I don't have this personal relationship, but what's happening here is important to me. I'm going to talk to you about it. But I haven't invited you. It's just that you came across my path, so here I am. So we'll go into a little bit more details of how that relates and why we don't want God to come across, the Father to come across our path, Yahweh to come across our path and say, now that you're here, I've got something for you. We'd rather have him call to us because he's personally invited, and we hear that call. And these are all these elements that, honestly, they're not going into the tabernacle until these elements are fully established and the dedication of the priesthood is done, the dedication, and I'll have to say that the waters of purification have been completed. Now they can begin the daily work within the tabernacle. So let's see, what else was there? Anything else? Now, the book of Vayikra, like I said, probably covers only 1 month, whereas like Shemot, it covers quite a long time period. I mean, if you think about where it starts out, and then we have the birth of Moses, and then he returns from his exile in the wilderness, and then there's a time period of the plagues, and then there is the Exodus, and when they arrive at Mount Sinai, and then from the time they arrive to the time that they finish the tabernacle, well, the time that they arrive and then they start collecting everything and assemble the tabernacle, then we have 9 months. So the tabernacle is birthed in 9 months. And
Really
yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different parallels that we could pull in, but then now it's like the glory fills the temple, or the glory fills the tabernacle, and Yahweh calls from the tabernacle, but he does not invite Moses in. Moses just goes to the entry, goes up to it, and starts receiving these additional instructions. So I think all of that is very, very important for us to take a look at, and not only just to understand the process and what they did, but these first 5 offerings that are talked about, like Joy said earlier, to draw near. Now, have you ever heard the phrase, oh, we're under the dispensation of grace? The dispensation of grace? Okay, I really dislike the terms dispensations. This was that dispensation,
Yes.
as if one thing transitioned into another transition, and then somehow those things in the past no longer have any value to us today. And then when we move into the next dispensation, then the things that we experience today no longer have any value to us in the next dispensation. I would say I don't think that's true. The dispensation of the return of our Messiah is still built upon everything that went before him. You can't remove the blood of Yeshua,
Right.
because aren't people going to be born during the time of the millennium? And does every person need to come to that point that they make that willful decision to follow Yeshua? And it's all based upon that relationship and his blood, his death, burial, and resurrection. So would the dispensation of grace be over when we move into the dispensation of the millennium? No. It's still, if you use the term, if you use those terms, I'm using their terms against them, okay? Or for explanation. So therefore, in that same logic, what about the things during the time of the tabernacle and the temples and the 400 silent years? And what about the time before Moses and the time of the patriarchs and the time of Noah or pre-Noah? How can you throw things into dispensation and say then it no longer applies? It doesn't make sense to me. So,
No.
I think it's really important to see that. But then on the other hand, what does Vayikra tell us about? Think about it. Not only do we have these offerings that are made, not only do we have the red heifer thing, we in the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, it talks about not only that we have the dedication of the priests, we have what happens when you have leprosy, what happens when you come in contact with the dead. What about a variety of different laws, directions, those things that are allowed, those things that are forbidden to do? We have all of that. We have blessings and curses. We have a lot of different things. We have the kosher laws, the laws of what we eat. So what we don't eat. And what are those things pertaining to? Is that just simply the priesthood? No. And I know we know that, but I'm setting this foundation because it's really important is to keep perspective as we go so we don't get lost in the weeds, even though in the weeds there's a lot of really interesting stuff. Or I don't think we should get lost in the weeds. Maybe we're going to get lost in the flowers and the herbs.
You gotta get to
And-
the weeds to get to the flowers.
And because we're not going to,
Mow them down.
maybe the weeds are in churchianity and but we're part through. That's way out here in the land of the Gentiles. No, I'm just saying we need to get into we're going to hit a lot of things that's in the meat of the word. But when we have discussions about what is clean and what's unclean, do you realize when in what believers do today and say, there's no reason to study out Leviticus. And yet, why do we see an issue of sanctification in modern day Christianity? Why is it that language within congregations is often not much different than language used outside of congregations? Now, when I was growing up, that was unheard of. Why is it now acceptable for children raised in the faith within whatever denomination, and those kids graduate, and when they go to get a roommate, they're getting a female roommate if it's a guy, or a male roommate if it's a girl? Why? Why is that? Why is that acceptable?
Didn't used to be.
And then why is it acceptable for that young man not to marry, but just to keep that young woman with him and never commit to her? Why is that acceptable? And it's acceptable, and many of those young people don't even return to church, but some of them are still attending. And in that type of lifestyle, why is that acceptable? I'm not even, let alone you go into the same sex lifestyles and you've got all sorts of people just bending rules and saying, well, we just want to be acceptable to everybody. At what point in time do we say, wait a minute, we want you to come in, but let's start looking at lifestyle. How do you look at lifestyle? Because is our lifestyle kosher? I want to say something about the community of the Yahad. Hold that thought for just a second. The community of the Yahad. One of the elements that when one said, hey, I want to join with your community, the Yahad, you know what I'm talking about, the Essene community, the community of the Zadok community. They examined, they interviewed you. They wanted to see if you are of the same faith. And then you went through a period of discipleship where they would let you come in for 1 to 3 years before they actually allowed you to be considered a member of the community. And one of those things about being a member of the community is that they wanted to hear what type of language you use. It goes beyond just foul language. That was not acceptable in those communities. I'm talking about what type of jokes did you tell? What type of, did you engage in gossip? Are you slandering your brother and saying, hey, so-and-so did something and I don't think that's right. But now they would pay attention to what type of lashon hara, that evil speaking would come out. I mean, these are just elements because their goal was to be pure before the Father. And where did they get those traditions? They got it out of this priesthood. This is the royal lifestyle. This is what allowed them to have these angelic encounters. This is the lifestyle that allowed them to hear the voice of Yah. When you read the apocryphal writings, it sounds like our Christian prophetic writings. Everything they prophesied when Yeshua would die to the year. This is what I've been discovering on the priestly calendar side.
Wow.
Why? Well, what would allow them to do that? Can any of us, we say, man, I'm just so tainted by the world and I constantly feel like I've got to cleanse myself and wash myself off. And are we experiencing that in our community or in our congregation?
Yes.
And when it was fluid with them, then why is it not, or fluent with them, why is it not fluid or fluent with us? And it just makes me step back and like,
We're still learning.
we're learning, but you know what?
There's
How long have we been walking in
I started
Torah?
to say, how long does it take you to wise up?
Yeah, I don't think.
I mean, they were 1 to 3 years. And then and part of that interview and that examination is they're looking at their giftings. And we're not just talking about their natural abilities, which was part of it. They wanted to see what their spiritual inclinations were, to see if do we put you in this part over here that has to do with the choir and which has to do with connecting with the angelic song? Do you have, are your inclinations spiritually connect you with the school of the prophets? These are all different things. So why is Vayikra so important, that this calling is calling up to him, to ascend to him? Why are we always constantly trying to bring Yahweh down? He's saying, draw close to me and I'll draw close to you. He didn't say, I'll draw close to you so I can be close to you as if you matter. We do matter, but we matter when we, because we, I don't want to mix the word. We matter in his kingdom when we hearken into his voice and we say, okay, I want to get closer. I want to draw near. I want to ascend. And I'm tired of being anchored down. Now, do the people that say, well, I'm not willing to elevate and go to that level, are they of any less value? I would say in Yah's eye, no. But his call is always the same. He's not a respecter of persons, but his rewards are based on those decisions. So, okay, Jackie.
I think you're going to be accountable for your gifts more than anything. What I was going way back is, if the Old Testament's done away with, why did the Lord tell us not to eat pork? He told us that for our own good. Now, do you think he eliminated that? That's a good good argument with somebody. He didn't eliminate that because he did that for our good. So why would he eliminate that in the second, he wouldn't.
Does he change? Does y'all ever change? Does he?
No.
Yeah.
Without reading further, Peter tells them exactly what that vision is.
Yeah.
I already had that discussion with my dad before he passed away.
Yeah. Yeah. Joy.
So this has been my thought too for a while. You talk about being the beautiful bride, and I think what you're saying has got a lot to do with it. I'm guilty, so guilty of it. You come here talking about everything else, but maybe, should we not focus on him on this day? And I mean, every day, but I'm just saying, they say that there's a remnant. And I'm like, I can see how that beautiful bride can just be a remnant because it's just there's so much grace and mercy. I realize that, but in my mind, I'm like, am I ever going to be able to not be in this world enough to be that beautiful bride, to take off these old ugly rags and put on, the beautiful jewels and the white,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of connected. I mean, I know it's about the priest, but isn't that who we are? That's who he's wanting in his beautiful bride to be, those righteous priests.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's exactly right. Because that's what Eddie and Tammy just put up, and I just put it on the thing, is that it tells us to be, let me get that quote back up. I scroll back down. It said, where'd it go? Anyway, it tells us how to be kings and priests. And that's what it does. It tells us how this is what this is.
Right.
This is what it's about. And Rexana said that it's about walking in the spirit and not in the flesh. And that is exactly, and I think that's exactly right. It's connected, because therefore then if we walk in the spirit, then how do we connect that into our natural world? And that is, we have to connect. It's the key. And I think that's where we're learning about that 400 silent years, is that we have a community that actually wrote out what they did. They wrote it out. There's no oral traditions, so there's no questioning about it. And then when we look at it, it's like, that sounds like the first century teachings that we've always heard about. Well, isn't it very interesting? We know there's been a corruption within churchianity, but there's stuff that we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater too, because there are certain things that were always kept. We knew it in the church. And then since we come into Torah, why is it that we somehow think that now we have to restart everything over? There's a lot of validity. I mean, think about this. How many people grew up in a time, hold on, Jackie, we grew up in a time that on Sundays, we put on our Sunday bests, right? I mean, I remember it was standard, even as a child, to put on a coat and tie.
Dress.
Yeah, Jackie.
I was just going to say that I believe our main thing with him, this is what I've always believed, this is my belief, is to exalt him, to honor him. It is not about us. But we do have to bring the kingdom in. But it's about, he's the only one worthy enough to be honored like we need to be honoring him, and to exalt him like we need to exalt him. It's about him. He said they wouldn't even recognize me in my own town. He is what it's about. That is why we're here. And if you're here for anything else, you better check your spirit. And I'm sure not there all the way. Don't get me wrong. But the exaltation of him puts him on his throne. Hello. We need to exalt him, honor him.
Yeah.
Give him love.
Yeah.
Give him all you got. If you don't give him all your got, if you don't give him all you got, if you hide something or you're not using that, you're not giving it all to him.
Yeah. So I think, I had that conversation with that young man that came into the lobby during service last week, and he's saying, I'm just not, that intellectual as a believer, and I just kind of follow my heart. Well, we know that the heart is evil above all things. And so it's like, well, I mean, it's a start, but it's going to take you, it'll take you a lot of different bad directions if you do that. But people would probably blame us for being too intellectual when we study out Torah like we do, and I'm like, that's
Jealousy.
that's
too.
a
part
that's a cop out.
yes.
Because what we do, and I hope that you sense that when you come and you join us, is that we want truth, and we want to study these things, and we want nuggets that are
Yes.
but we also want it to that you're just, man, I'm so glad I win. I just feel like I am getting fed with something that's nourishing me, not to lose people in some intellectual chase and get too nerded out on something. However, I have some really interesting nerdy things. I don't think we're going to get to it.
Well, we go from level to level to level.
But
too.
we do want to use this because we need that encouragement. Yeah, Daryl.
All this points to is what we're told to do, come out of the world. And not to act in the world. And we're peculiar people, not from the way we dress, the way we talk, or anything, it's the way we act. And that's our conduct, we will win with people.
Mhm.
If you want to stand out in a crowd now, just keep your word.
No, that's true.
One
That's true.
last thing before you get started. And one of the reasons why we're peculiar people is to them is because they don't understand, but a lot of them don't want to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Burl said this. I'm going to put this on here. I thought this was interesting. It says, treat Yeshua as your spouse, even have a place setting for Shabbat meal just for him.
That's good.
Well, that's a really great idea.
So
And she's also said, one of the things she said, it's date time. Wash and prepare for his time with you as a first date.
Come on.
that's great.
And she said he recently placed that in my heart. So it's cool.
So I want to say one more thing too, and Burl, I agree with that, because I think that if you are having some rough talk or you're watching stuff on TV, if Yeshua was there personally, I mean, he is there spiritually, but I mean, if his person was there, would you have that on there? Or would you want to be sitting there talking to him about him and what he expects of us, not watching some crappy stuff or listening to something crappy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
saying bad words. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I got you. Yeah.
I was trying to tell my
Because what does
kids
it
that.
do? I mean,
Well, there's a scripture about our word.
it
too.
does something
Yeah,
to you
okay.
when you hear language, even just
Yes.
language itself.
Yes.
It does something inside. And if it doesn't, then you say, Father, why am I so callous to that?
Yes.
And so, but I find it very interesting. I mean, I have people that don't even know me, and they go, well, I know you're a religious guy. I had that this week.
I listen
And
to you now.
or they'll say something, and then there's some language, and then they look at me and say, hey, I'm sorry. They don't even know me. But so I don't.
It's how you walk.
What I guess what we need to do, and I guess that's what Daryl is also talking about, is that we need to carry the countenance
Yeah.
of one that's been set apart.
Amen. Yeah.
Yes, that's good.
So, and I can't say I'm not perfect at that. I'm not perfect in any way, but to carry the countenance. Now, there's also the point that we have to be doers, and we have to use our voice. We have to be that type of person as well. But that first level is, how many people I've seen, they get so fired up in their faith, and yet their language is so rough. Y'all can use anything in anybody in any type of circumstances. And I'm not saying that if one doesn't use that type of languages, I'm going to use the colloquial word, a wuss. Actually it takes more strength to control language. But on the other hand is that someone needs to show great strength of character by holding to particular standards and living that out. Well, where do we get that? Well, I think Vayikra can give us that foundation. And yeah, Jackie.
I used to go to big church, and we'd have the life groups, which is Bible study. And this lady was very prominent in the church. and we'd go over to her house. One time I went over there and she was excited and she said, I don't know how a very bad word. And I'm not even going to say, it's the worst word you could say, okay? And I thought, I was new in there and I was like, huh? Because when you go before people that you think are righteous with the Lord and they splurt out the vomit, I mean, you're like, this lady's been in here for years. And I had a hard time understanding how she could speak that. And she apologized. And I know we all make mistakes, but this was bad.
And we do. We do not hold those things against people.
But it made me
but yeah, it does make us step back.
yes.
But we must not let that snuff our light out either.
No, I kept going, but I was like, wow.
So
it makes a difference. I mean, what you say.
by the way, I do want to say this. I have an update, by the way, with the things that are going on here in Amarillo. And if you notice when you came in,
I did.
I put up a couple posters on both sets of doors. And so about Amarillo being a sanctuary city, I'm going to make an announcement during the service a little bit more and some information that I think is very important to know concerning some events that have transpired here in Amarillo and are going before the Supreme Court on Tuesday.
Wow.
So I'm going to give you an update and a little bit more of what's going on there. This all relates to our faith, though. And this is all about the strength of character. And this is also, this is all about, I'll say this, and I'll say it again later on. I went to a pastor's meeting on Thursday morning regarding the sanctuary city and the cause of the unborn here in Amarillo. And I was like, wow, okay. I was invited and I was like, I'm going to go. And I showed up. I don't know anybody, but I'll go and meet people. And guess what? I went there. I was the only pastor.
What?
Wow.
What?
Now there's other believers and people that have laity roles in congregation. There's about a dozen of us all together. And I was like, I'm the only pastor here. And I'm thinking we've got 300 congregations in Amarillo, give or take a few. I don't know what the count is now. It used to be 300, maybe more. Maybe more. There's a lot of little home churches and stuff, but pastors, I know a lot of people have to work and they couldn't make it, but there's a lot of associates, youth pastors, all sorts of different pastors. In some of these churches, there's more than just one. There's 2, 3, 4, 5 dozen, you name it. And not even an associate pastor even was there. And I'm like,
That's bad.
Really?
That's really bad.
so anyway, I'll go into that a little bit more, but this is where, because we think about these things and yeah, I know there's a lot of things that we can latch onto, but I think it's more important that we start to begin to boil down these really critical things that relate to our community, wherever we're at. If you're online, what boils down critical to your community and what can you do? It's like, well, I can't hit the meetings. I don't have transportation or whatever, but can you write letters? Can you make phone calls? What's your social media look like? If you're on some type of social media, what's it look like? So utilize everything while we have the ability to utilize those things. Okay, let's go on to this about going into Vayikra. This is a quote from Avraham Yehoshua Greenbaum. And I use some of these quotes because these things preserve culture for us. So you say, well, these are rabbis and they're from the lineage of the Pharisees and the Orthodox and that sort of thing. Well, I don't rule anything they say out because they preserve in their words cultural things that lend and give us insight and can also give us inspiration. He said the Torah code of sacrifices and purifications may appear ancient, primitive, complicated, and irrelevant. But if we are willing to explore the Torah with the fresh eyes of children, ready to take the word of God on trust with faith and belief, we can discover that the sacrificial system contains the keys to repentance and the healing of the soul and the entire world. Now, let me ask you this real quick. What do most Christians say about the sacrificial system? It's cruel?
Brutal and brutal.
Cruel and brutal? Okay. What else do they say?
Doesn't apply today.
Doesn't apply today. If
Been done away.
Yeshua.
it's done away
Yeshua,
with.
It died on the cross with Yeshua.
Yeshua fulfilled them all.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's nailed at the cross.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and what is their understanding as to the purpose of the animal sacrifices?
For atonement.
For atonement? For forgiveness? So it's like, okay, man, I did the sin, so I got to take an animal down and sacrifice it. Do you know that that's not the Hebrew culture? It's not the Hebrew culture. Actually, the Hebrew culture was to say, look, I messed up. I didn't know I was breaking a commandment. Because there's no sacrifice for intentional sin. So let's say I didn't know I broke a commandment, got caught up in something, didn't realize it. Well, then the solution is that there's an offering that's made. And so, but why? Why would there be a solution for something like that? Could it be that every time that Torah is broken, it's worthy of the death penalty? Because didn't Paul say that the
It says
wages
that.
of sin is death?
Yes, it says that though.
Right? So if the
Like
wages,
if you break one, you've broken them all.
you broke one, you broke them all.
That's right. That's in there.
Yeah. So
That's been thrown in my face many times.
we know, yeah, okay, a lot of these things, they point to Yeshua. They point to his sacrifice. But if we look at it this way, someone would say, I am so close to y'all. And I did something that would break his heart. And I deserve to die. Then wouldn't it be grace that y'all would say, I don't want to lose that relationship with you. So here's something that in your place will give up its life so that we can have that fellowship restored, so that you can draw near. And here's this grace for you.
Mm-hmm.
Here's grace for you. Here is a substitution for you. And then it's going to cost you. And not only is it going to cost you, but some of them you actually would slit their throat yourself to do. And some you lay your hands on them and lean into them as if you're giving all of your strength, your life force into that, because it's getting ready to give its life up because of us, because of what I just did, because of this thing. And even whether it was intentional, unintentional, whatever my reason is for bringing it, it's like, I can't crawl up on the altar. Yahweh did not demand sacrifices from us. What he did is he provided a way, a substitute. And that's what, if you want to boil all of these down to, these are substitute. They cost. I was thinking about about Passover. It's coming up. And if you think the people that came from all of Israel, and the process of bringing a lamb to the altar and processing all of those animals had to be.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know. How big's the grill?
Right.
Can you put everything on the grill and you got a week to do it? But the Passover lamb, we know that that's handled by the priests, but everybody's bringing an offering. And how do you process that through during the feast? You need a full unleavened bread week to process everybody through. And you got to wait your turn. I don't know. They take a number. It's like, okay, the Craig family, we need the Craig family. You're on deck. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
how did they do all of that?
I don't
And
know.
yet understanding that if you're waiting, and where the tabernacle was first set up over in Shiloh, it's like an arena. It's like an amphitheater where you could set up with your family all along the hills around the tabernacle and watch the events going on. And everybody, in the line, this big train of people that are processing through. And then, at some point, we need the clan of Dan. The clan of Dan, you're next. This is your day. All right. The tribe of Dan. We need the tribe of Dan. And so to me, all of that's a process. And let me get, who likes to stand in line? I went to, there were like 36 people that graduated in my high school senior class. And then I went to Oklahoma State University. There's 22,000 people there. And I went, enrollment day, the line went all the way down this long hall and it went around the next long hall. And I'm like, and the people are sitting, 3 to 4 people deep.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm like, what did I do? Why am I here? But you think, in a natural thinking and the processing, I finally got to you finally get to the registrar's desk and, you got your list of classes, please. Now after this line, I can still get into these classes. Yeah.
I went to the store last week and I was going to buy a mirror. And there was like, I guess maybe 6 people ahead of me. And it was moving so slow. I just put that mirror up and left. No patience to stand in line whatsoever. I can't imagine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Wow.
and all the Walmarts are now being remodeled. And you have somebody tell you which line to go to.
Yeah.
And you may or may not go to a self-checkout, or you may or may not go.
So
Oh, it's already happening on brand.
So I think about all of this and you think about the processes that they did back in the day. And then you say, what price and what cost is it that I'm willing to participate with this group of people?
Yeah.
As strange as these people may be. Now, it wasn't strange to their culture, but for those of us, when we're so caught up in time and how fast things can go. And I want, just give me the juice. I'll drink the juice so that I can be the person, right? Just that little bottle of vitamins and then I'll be the superhuman believer. It doesn't come that way.
No.
Wish it were, but
It's a steady diet.
I mean, would any of us in this room be willing to join the Yahad community if it meant
I wouldn't make
waiting a
it.
year, waiting for 3 years, going through the discipleship program? How important to be with that community when you see all of the usurpations of the religious system up there in Jerusalem that got so corrupted and caught up in their mafia type style of rule. The political corruption, the criminality, and the things going on in the temple, like
That's what
Yeshua
come
came
against.
across. Yeah. And would one be willing to understand that it could be a death sentence because they would send out assassins to kill particular people in this community?
Oh my.
This community actually fled to Egypt at one point in time during the Seleucid Empire, during the time of the Greeks, until Rome took over And that's why we find a lot of the Dead Sea Scroll writings that were in the library in Alexandria
A lot went on
that
in
were
Egypt.
preserved. So
Yeah.
some were, and so some were actually down there preserved as opposed to being in the Qumran caves. Yeah, Rick.
So this system set up here for the sacrifice. What about back in the time of Abraham and Noah and back to Adam and Eve? Did they have the same type deal or?
Noah did. He
Well,
sacrificed as soon as he got out.
Altars.
Let me just say it this way. I was thinking about this as I was studying out this yesterday evening, and I was thinking about all of these, and the sacrifices, and you think about the lambs or the goats and whatever was brought as the sacrifice, and they'd have to pull the carcass,
Rib cage.
the skin, off of these. Then you have all of the pelts of the sacrificed animals, and I was thinking, this animal gave up everything for me. Okay, because I even get to eat part of it, and the intels and the fat and all that, those will go up in a smoke offering. But what about the pelt? What did they do with the pelts? And then I remembered, and this thought came to me, and I really believe is the Holy Spirit speaking to me, and it's talked about, remember Adam? Adam was able to draw near to Yahweh every day in the cool of the day. He was clothed in what Yah clothed him with, which I believe was light. And when he lost that light, an animal gave up its life, and he wore the pelt of that animal to clothe him. So wrapped around him was the very grace that he experienced, even the love of Yah after he committed treason. And I think about, these animals that were lifted up, and we begin to see that Yah has so wrapped himself, still wraps us. And then what happens in the future? Because I was reading something about it. It actually has to do with, there's so much in the category of the numbers, the value of all these letters and the names and these phrases and stuff. And they have values and they add up, and it's like, wow, this is really blows my mind. That's the geeky stuff. That was like, I don't think I can even teach an nth of it, but to where it makes sense. But nevertheless, it's but one of the aspects of it has to do with light, and let me see if I have it. And I was thinking light. Well, Adam was clothed in light, and yet, what is the glory? What are we going to be clothed with when our bodies are glorified? What makes us glorified? We think about the robes of righteousness that we get, that Yeshua gives to us, this robe of righteousness. And yet that robe of righteousness is the Torah. We wrap ourselves in him. He's the flesh that wrapped himself around us. So when the Father is looking at us, he sees this flesh of Yeshua that was substituted on our behalf. And yet and it's called righteousness, a robe of righteousness. It's so then I think about what in my behavior, in my language, in my lifestyle is deserving to wear this robe of righteousness that needs to be taken care of. And then I look at the resurrection. At the time of the resurrection, when we receive these glorified bodies, how do we know that they're glorified? But it's by the clothing, this clothing of light. And so, again, what's he do? He restores that which was lost. We're carried. Adam wore these skins, the lamb of Yah. he wears these skins around him that carry us all the way through to this point in time, where we see that it's always been an age of grace. If you want to use that term, it's always an age of grace. It's just we see these dimensions shifting and changing because every one of them is to bring us to the point of the cross or the tree or the stake or whatever you want to call it. And then we see that age doesn't just culminate at that point, but it does. It just continues to grow even more to where then when he returns, and there's the resurrection of the dead, and there's this glorification for those that died and those that are not yet dead, and that we all ascend together. And ascend is another way of saying enter into his presence.
Yes.
Okay, it's not to go live on the clouds or it's this ascension into where he lives,
Where he's at.
and what allows us to be there is this finally our wedding attire is completed, and we've completely wrapped ourselves in the fullness of it. If you think about all of the stitching and the fabric and the bling and everything that goes into some of these wonderful looking wedding gowns, you think, my goodness, how long did it take to put that together, thread by thread,
The little pearls and the
all the
jewels.
pearls, the
Yeah,
jewels, the
yeah.
lace, all of those beautiful things. And so it's elaborate. No wonder these dresses cost $15,000 because of the handmade ornate intricacies of it.
Yeah.
And I'm saying $15,000 this is probably just a middle of the road, low end wedding dress. I don't know what they are. Thank goodness I haven't had to go wedding dress shopping, but seriously, you think about that, and then what we're clothed with. So when you think about these sacrifices, that each one has a pelt, even to the pigeons and the doves that were allowed for the poor to use. Nothing was wasted.
Use everything.
Yeah.
Okay, I think probably most everybody in here and online, they sometime or another tuned in and watch The Chosen, and you get a little bit of a better glimpse on how the people, day-to-day people lived then, that the way things was going on. So my question is, if you start from the first day of the year, say an average family of 4 or whatever that's fishermen or something like that, from there to the end of the year, how many sacrifices are they? How many sheep? How many goat? How many, these people didn't even have enough money to pay the taxes. How are they supposed to come up with, because they had like the daily morning sacrifice and the afternoon one, and where did all those come from? And you had the ones that you were responsible for. If you did something wrong, then you were supposed to
Just one or
do something, so here's somebody that can't even feed their family or having a hard time because the Roman taxes were nearly half of what we have today. So they were pretty severe. And so you're looking at that. Where did they come up with? Because a lot of these people didn't have a flock of sheep out here or a flock of goats and everything. They were probably lucky if they had 1 or 2. And if they were supposed to sacrifice them there at Passover so where did they come up with them? And they couldn't afford to purchase them. So
Some really good questions. And I would have to, yeah, Joy, go ahead.
Well, for one thing, it says in there, for the poor, you can sacrifice pigeons.
Mhm.
But not everybody was doing that.
One guy even said last night that you could even use flour. Flour could be a sacrifice as well
Mhm.
for, whatever. And so most people might have had flour and stuff, but I mean, I get it. Where all these little animals came from. to do all
So,
this.
so think about how the first Passover took place.
Back to the question I had, if you were not just dirt poor, say like back then you were middle class, from the first of the year to the end of the year, how many animals were, if you
Expected.
follow this, you do
Yeah.
this time and this one, Passover, you do this and this and this. I mean, how
At least
many
three.
are you?
Right.
And
There- there's three
who
buildings.
furnishes the daily sheep in the morning and then the one in the afternoon?
The Levitical priests had them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
but they had to get them somewhere
Okay.
or another.
I have some thoughts about that. Daryl, what were you going to say?
Well, the Pharisees and Sadducees had a record. They loaned money to buy.
Yes, yes.
Didn't charge. That's one of the reasons why Christ sacrificed after he ran them out.
Yeah. Because they were unrighteous about selling.
Yeah.
Always follow the money.
So keep in mind, one of the things that they would all go to Jerusalem all at the same time, but families went together. So you would have a whole clan of families. So your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, your parents, your family, grandparents, if they're still around, you all traveled as a clan together. And remember in the first Passover where it said to bring the lamb in and it said you could bring in and invite your neighbors over as well, but you're supposed to stay inside until after the angel had passed over. And then you were to eat all of it, leave nothing by morning. So you think, so if someone doesn't have enough and you're going on a feast in your clan can do like a clan offering. So you as your own family, your wife and your 2 kids, 3 kids, however it is, and you're like, we're barely scraping by. How do we come up with a lamb? We're living in town. We don't have any pasture land. I mean, and it's tough because of the taxes. I don't even have the money, but you can go as a group and everybody would be included. We're all coming together with this offering. And those would also be during the feast times. So that's kind of an extra special type of event, but there's also a planning for each one of those feasts and taking care of that. So I think that's one way around it. But if you're coming up with one of these, let's say you're coming up with this, the chatat offering, the sin offering, and you're going individually with that, then as a someone that's poor, impoverished, having difficulty even being able to get by, then I would have to say this:
That's right.
you can trap your own pigeon and bring
Have
that pigeon.
flour. I think you could use the flour.
You could bring that flour.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure. You could do that because, there's still probably some flour that you're using to get by with to make your own bread. And you'd set some of that aside, and it might be a sacrifice because the next loaf of bread may be just a little bit smaller, but to be able to set something aside that costs and,
Maybe even salt. Salt.
Yes,
maybe.
it was
Because there
very
is salt
expensive.
covenant. I mean, I don't know.
all of these meat sacrifices offerings, they were required to
salt.
be salted.
So that they had to have had a stockpile of salt,
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
Dead Sea was up there.
Yeah.
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 But so you had the daily morning sacrifice and the afternoon one. So right there's 700 sheep right there. Right?
I don't know the numbers.
Well, okay. So I see what you're getting at. You're wondering where those sheep came from. What I'm trying to tell you is the Levitical priests, when people gave things, when the wealthy, I guess, did give things, they gave to them. and that was theirs. And so they pastured those sheep and kept them, right? And I'm
So-
sure that they multiplied. So did they get it from their herds?
Sandy had a great teaching on that when she went
Yes.
into the Psalm 23 teaching, I believe it
Mhm.
was, and talking about the sheep, that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. She went in and we talked about sheep, and that's what Bethlehem was for. They would have all these flocks around Bethlehem. These were the flocks that are being raised up for the use in the temple, because it's not that far away, and yet the pasture lands were great, and they would raise these sheep, they would breed the sheep, they would have, and so they could have a huge supply. I mean, you think about during the time of David and the number of animals that he sacrificed when he brought the Ark of the Covenant up from Shiloh to Jerusalem. Every 6 paces, they did another sacrifice. I mean, we're talking about a bloody mess. I mean, we're talking a trail of blood but every time they went 6 paces, they did another sacrifice. There was tens of thousands of animals that were, but why was it? Is it because of a horrific, brutal, cruel slaughter? Or was David following a pattern here saying, we are ascending,
Drawing close.
we're drawing close, we are coming before Yah, and it's not because of our merits here, but this substitute is a representation of ourselves laying everything down. David said, when he was talking about the field that he bought, he says, how can I, the man was going to just give him the field. And he says, how can I take this when it costs me nothing?
Exactly.
And so he said, I have to pay. I have to do what's right here. As much as your willingness, I appreciate that. But that doesn't, because I'm not laying myself down here.
That's good.
And
Well, one of the things that I was listening to was talking about if they set up the altar over there and started the daily sacrifice, they said that there would be an outcry from the world saying, look at the cruelty you're doing to these animals.
Mhm.
Stop it.
Mhm.
And that's what someone would justifiably go in there and stop the daily sacrifice because PETA said so.
you can see it's all set up. It's all perfectly set up for that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right.
When Abraham was supposed to sacrifice his son, and the Lord stopped him, what did he do? He put a ram in the thicket. Okay? If there's like somebody that was starving and didn't have one and it didn't work out, they had the family or whatever, he was a righteous man. He loved the Lord. The Lord knew this. He was always with him.
Yeah.
You know, it was his main goal was to honor the Lord. I think the Lord's going to supply the need. Okay.
Right.
That's good. That's
So-
good. That's right.
And realize that you say, well, that ram was provided for free. Well, so he just had to grab the ram and offer it. No, he already had determined in his heart that which was most precious
Son.
was going to be given up. And so Yah stopped him before he's able to kill his son. And he says, man, if you've gone above and beyond, and I'm going to give you, here's a substitution. Do you think Abraham got up and cheered, or do you think he just broke down and wept? And Isaac,
Mhm.
that they both, I mean, Isaac laid his life down willingly.
And he was
Were there all sorts of questions? I bet there were all sorts of questions. Like, I don't understand all this, but Dad, I trust you. You're my father. I trust you. And I trust our Father in heaven. And whether I die or whatever, if I die, then I know where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
And if I don't die,
And that's
we
easy
don't
to
even
say,
know.
but you know,
But there was
You'll be
no
tempted.
out. There was no out. There's no plan B for Abraham when he laid down Isaac. There was no plan B. Yah had the plan.
that's right.
So And that's, I think that's some of those things that just amazingly, just when we go, and these are these nuggets, so much of an impact here that how often did we just read through this Vayikra, this Torah portion, because we've read it through before and it's repetitive and just kind of, we got through it. But that's why I love our discussions, our midrash. We can kind of
Work those things out.
work these things out. Yeah.
Open the door, yeah.
Sacrifice is what if you were rich like now, told to give as we can afford. The sacrifice was the same way. If a rich man wanted to sacrifice a flock of sheep, he did that. But if the poor man, all he had was a cup of fine flour, that's what he took.
Mhm.
Because it was both.
It's still a sacrifice.
The heart,
Yeah.
The attitude, what you was bringing.
Yes, yes,
Which is why
The physical
Abel's,
part of it was really kind of secondary.
yes.
sacrifice was accepted and Cain's not. Because Abel had the little heart, Cain did not.
He wanted to give something that was second best.
Yes. Which is Malachi. You think, now you go through centuries of this process, centuries of the feast days, the centuries of the sacrifices, and this repetitive process, this cycle of like, now we're doing it again and again and again and again. And you can see why, you get a twist and a usurpation and a overthrow of the priesthood and all of this sort of stuff. And what I really like about this understanding, studying out this community of the Ahad, the Essene community, and seeing, their heart and what they did. Did you know, by the way, just a side note, average person probably lived 50 to 60 years back in that time
They
period.
didn't live as long.
These people lived 120 years.
Did they really?
And so
Well, yeah, that makes sense.
there's, but why? What is it that was infused in them? There was something because of their lifestyle, from what they ate, their medicines, their belief in healing, their prayers for the sick, all of these things, these miracles
The whole
that took
package,
place
yeah.
is very important. But what happened in Malachi, we have this reported, and he says, chapter 1,
Yeah, because doesn't he say in several places that the sacrifices are a stench to him or something? So it got to where it didn't mean anything to anybody. They were just, anyway, I think, or it was the wrong priesthood,
Yeah. Whew. Okay, so Malachi chapter 1. He says, verse 6, a son honors his father and a servant his master. Then if I'm a father, where is my honor? And if I'm a master, where is my respect, says Yahweh of hosts to you, O priests who despise my name? But you say, how have we despised thy name? You are presenting defiled food upon my altar. But you say, how have we defiled thee? In that you say the table of Yahweh is to be despised. But when you present the blind for sacrifice, is it not evil? And when you present the lame and sick, is it not evil? Why not offer it to your governor? Would he be pleased with you? Or would he receive you kindly, says Yahweh of hosts? So, verse 13, verse 12, but you are profaning it in that you say the table of Yahweh is defiled, and as for its fruit, its food is to be despised. You also say, my, how tiresome it is. And you disdainfully sniff at it, says Yahweh of hosts, and you bring what was taken by robbery and what is lame or sick, so you bring the offering. should I receive that from your hand, says Yahweh? But cursed be the swindler who has a male in his flock and vows it, but sacrifices a blemished animal to Yahweh. For I am a great king, says Yahweh of hosts, and my name is feared among the nations. And I have to dare say, this is one of the connections. Like, well, they're talking specifically about a procedure that was being abused or misused at the time of the temple and the altar and all that. And I would say he's speaking to our generation.
Mhm.
Yep.
And I say that we present our best to Yah, and he's looking like, you didn't give everything.
Get out of here.
You didn't. Well, you say you've given enough, and you have every right to draw near. I listened to a song last night which is, everybody knows it. I'm a friend of God. I am a friend of God. Well, you know, it goes on, and I don't know all the words of it, but it was real popular back in the 90s, and all these people going around saying, "Oh yeah, I'm just a friend of God," you know, like Abraham was a friend of God, and all that. You know, it's all cool. And then we have these lifestyles that we say, "Well, my sacrifices, I got up and I went to church today." Is that a sacrifice?
Should be a love.
Should you know? That's a really good point. I'm glad you said that. That's a requirement, yes, but is it a requirement that I long to do and look forward to every week? Or is it, check that off the list, I got that done today. Is that not like a blind or lame sacrifice?
Yes.
And that we're coming to the king saying, I'm here. Aren't you going to honor my presence? Like, I need healing. Don't you want to just touch me today? You know, I mean, really?
What are you going to do for me today?
I mean, but that's the attitude, and and where do you get that? Well, I have to say that it comes from the pulpit.
Grace.
It comes from
Greasy grace.
this greasy grace teachings. It comes from people that are, Yeshua warned us about, the blind leading the blind, and where because they don't understand the protocols of coming before the king, then lifestyle is all under the blood. It's under the blood. He just sees the blood. But that's just like saying, I'm coming wearing a mask, and all you see is this nicely painted mask, and you don't know the hurt, the agony, the shortfallings, the sin, all of the ugliness of my life, because I have a nice, pretty mask on. And so when we come into the king's house and we come into his throne room, all of that's stripped off. As much as we think it's still on us, he's removed it. And yeah, he may still see that skin covering on us, but he sees through all that, because the heart, he sees the very, very nature of the heart. And I praise y'all for the blood of Yeshua. Boy, I depend on that.
Right.
On a daily basis. And yet, are we like that little child that's just so innocent? I mean, I look at Amarillo and I think, that she's at that age, and it's like, I don't want her to ever grow out of that innocence. And yet we have to be careful as parents and grandparents, and let alone the kids that she's around, and how quickly that innocence will be snuffed out and her attitude changes, and how quickly do children can pick up on language, just the language that we use, abusive language, foul language, manipulative language, gossip language, all of those different things, the things that
Look at your
become
actions.
those barriers and stuff. Exactly. Yeah. So these are all, those are all just challenges that we face. Okay. Did I miss a comment?
I was gonna say a minute ago, And then going back to what we were talking about, which I love what we're talking about family. You know, he gave us we have Job as an example. You know, how people think, well, I go to church and I need to be, yeah, like you say, glorify me, yeah. Well, Job, everything was taken away from Job and he was tested. But even when he didn't have anything, he was still exalting Yah, is what he was doing. He was still lifting him up. He was still coming against his friends and, you know, he never gave up. So he didn't have anything. The Lord wasn't building him up. He was taking him down, and he still exalted him. That is how we have to be. It's not, you know, and yes, we all need to use our giftings, but it's about him again, about him.
Amen. Yeah. Guys, we are just like, I didn't even get to this and the diminished olive and all this stuff, but it's like almost 2:00.
It is. Quick.
Well, there's a reason why you have to go down the other rabbit hole.
Exactly. Rabbit holes are good, in my opinion.
Eventually, all rabbit holes come together.
Because that's where you learn sometimes in the rabbit holes.
It's a den. It's tunnels. It's tunneling together. It's like the deep underground military bases, right?
Love truth.
Okay. I was going to hit a whole different subject, but I think the direction I really was wanting to go.
You got told no.
Yeah, it needed somewhere else. We needed to go somewhere else. So I'm going to pick up on this.
See, that's called
During the
being
message.
used in the kingdom.
And
God
because
used that.
it's just so loaded, and you know, I want
Listening.
as a pastor, I want to feed you with something that you'll chew on this until next time we come back
Yes.
around to Vayikra, Torah portion again. Okay, and because it's so to me, when I was going through, I was like, this is just so good. It's just so good. So y'all just get your knife and fork out ready, and we're going to dish it out one bite at a time during the message. So y'all come back and join us during the message. And of course, time for praise and worship. So those are online. Join back with us at 3. I already have the feeds up. So just set your notification bell there. If you haven't given us a thumbs up, give us a thumbs up. And we will just pick up everybody where we left off on the other side. So Shabbat shalom.